Okay, so somebody on Reddit once again asked about playing guitar on piano, and in this case, fingerstyle guitar. So, first of all, I'm just going to say don't do this. If you're trying to play something fingerstyle, find the chords and arrange them rather than trying to play exactly what's on the page. I've tried reading a lot of fingerstyle sheet music and it just doesn't translate very well. Now, if I had a little C major thing and I was trying to play it in a fingerstyle style on the piano, I might play something like this. And that sounds really nice on piano. However, if I was actually taking something that was directly from fingerstyle guitar, it might be something like this. Now, that doesn't sound bad, but it is unwieldy. It's not very idiomatic to the piano. It's very difficult to play and doesn't add that much more than just playing a simpler pattern. So simplify and arrange down. Make your chords smaller. If you're going to do this, just use chords, don't use the fingerstyle. Okay. However, the guy who was requesting this mentioned a specific song that I guess he's trying to figure out. And it's called Rising Red Lung by Wilco. I'm not familiar. But this song is mostly Travis picking. And if you're not familiar, it's a style of guitar comping, I suppose. And it actually lends itself pretty well to piano. This one in particular works a little better because it's only using 4 strings. That means condensed range, which makes it work even better. Okay, so you probably want to go find tablature to start with for a couple of reasons. Tablature tends to be a little bit more accurate than just chord sheets on a place like Ultimate Guitar. The problem with chord sheets sometimes, if they're for slightly more complicated songs, is that guitarists of lesser skill, or even those who are pretty skilled, want to create a chord sheet that's very accessible to a lot of people. That means lots of open chords, lots of cowboy chords that most people know. And so a lot of times that'll take out a lot of the color chords in a song, or it'll take something that's meant to be played, on the 9th fret and put it down by the nut, and it doesn't sound the same. People who actually generate tab tend to be a little bit more accurate with it. It's obviously not 100%, none of this is, but it's going to be a little bit closer. So find the tab, figure out what's being played, and then you can figure out if you need to simplify it after the fact. At the very least, if you have some chord theory, now you have the notes and you know what the chords are, and you can revoice those chords and make it work better on piano. Okay, so I have a trick for being able to look at tab and very quickly figuring out what notes are being played on each string. And this is useful because even if you're a knowledgeable guitarist who can quickly look at shapes in tab and know that that's whatever chord. I mean, most people who have some background, they look at a G in tablature and they know that's a G or that's a D or that's an A, whatever. The easy chords, at least. But in a case like this song is an open C. I just don't know my shapes in open C. So this trick will help for that. However, it does sort of require that you understand key signatures and stuff like that. So basically what I do is I treat each root or each open string as the root of a key. And then I know the frets that correspond to the diatonic notes in that key. So the important frets are 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, and then 12 is your octave. those are all of your diatonic notes. So that makes it pretty easy. If you understand your key signatures, you can do that very quickly and just figure out what each thing corresponds to. Ninth fret is the sixth of whatever key. So if I'm in the key of E, if I have an E string and I see something on the ninth fret, I know that's a C sharp. That assumes that you can do that math quickly in your head. That's something that I have to do a lot, so I know it. So hopefully that's useful to you, but it's better than doing this thing where you're like, okay, I'm on the E string and I'm on the ninth fret, E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You know, that's going to take you forever to do an entire sheet of tablature. Okay, so I was too lazy to set up my acoustic electric or set up another microphone, so I'm going to try to muddle through the basics of Travis picking on this guitar. This one was already tuned in open D, so it was easy to drop down to C. So let's go over what basically happens so that you can understand a little bit better on piano. And my calluses are in terrible shape, so it's going to be rough muddling through this, but I'll try. So normally, you're going to start your pattern with your thumb on the low string, getting your bass. And then there will usually be a little harmony plucking in the middle, some other notes. And then usually there's some note in between those harmony notes that you play right after. So all together in a sequence, and in this case, and in most cases, you'll close out with some other little fiddly bits. Okay, so that's the basics of that. Okay, so now let's actually apply those concepts on the piano. So each little section of this with these different chords, you're going to have your low note, which would be your thumb note, then your little harmony bit here, which would have been your P and M, and then your little middle note, which would have been your I, your pointer finger, is actually going to be over here. It's outside of that. And the little fiddly bits at the end, which is basically just rocking the harmony. Then you change chords, and this is where it gets a little awkward. This is a finger awkward thing on piano when the chord changes, because now your I bit, your pointer finger note, is not down here where I can play it with a thumb. It's in the middle of this chord. And it's kind of hard to play quickly and still play it lightly and evenly. And then it moves on to another chord. I'm not going to cover all the chords here. So this is actually a tune where you can translate this pretty directly, note for note, and it works just fine. Not every tune works quite that well, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. Alright, so now let's talk about a couple of considerations for adapting this kind of thing. For one, make sure you don't just nail that bottom note. The piano is just a little bit more resonant down there than a guitar is. Even a dreadnought is not going to have as much drive as a piano has, so it would be really easy to unbalance things and have this. So try to be as light as possible. That's the note the lowest parts is where you need to be very aware not to accidentally overdo it. I would recommend using the soft pedal if you can. I say soft pedal specifically because upright pianos tend to have a soft pedal, not an actual una corda pedal the way that a grand does. And the mechanism works differently in different uprights, but generally it always works differently than the way that a grand does. And it usually creates a warmer sound. And you had mentioned specifically that's what you wanted. Now this song in particular, it definitely sounds like he is picking with fingertips, not with fingernails, and definitely not with any sort of finger picks. It's a very soft, warm sound. So You just you want to be aware of that when you're trying to recreate it on the piano. If you're playing on a digital instrument and you have access to the EQ coming out through an amp or something, you might want to tweak that a little bit. It's kind of a hard thing to say exactly what to do. It's going to depend on what room you're playing in and all that kind of stuff. But you might want to cut some of the highs a little bit. It's a hard call because the guitar tends to be higher and twangier than piano generally, and tends to lean harder on those highs anyway. So you almost want to get that to guitar twang, but you want the warmth, so you want to take out some of the highs. It's a hard call. And I'd also just be aware that although the bass might give you some warmth, the piano's already going to have a lot of bass. You might want to pull back a little bit on that. And that might help you get a little closer to this sound. Okay, so like I mentioned, that song works pretty well translating directly from what's in the tab. But let's talk about what would happen and some ways that you could adapt this same kind of thing if it was over a wider range or whatever. Just some ideas for making it work on piano. So your first chord, I'll use the chords from that song. The first chord was a C add 2 or C add 9, whatever you want to call that. And there's no 5 in the guitar version, but I'm going to add the 5 back in here. And basically I just have this, I'm going to condense it down to an octave instead of it being an octave and a ninth. I'm just going to have a ninth. So C, E, G, C, D. And this still has some of that rocking motion that you end up with in the Travis picking, and most importantly it has that little thumb bit at the bottom. You can get that kind of feel. The next chord, you could say it's a C6 with no 5, but I actually think it's a minor over C. Adding that 5 would be bad. It doesn't sound right. So I've got less notes to work with here, but I can still make that pattern work. C, E, A, C. Next chord is a G minor add 4, or you could call it a B flat 6 over G. Kind of depends on the functional context, which I haven't looked at. So I'm going to go ahead and spread that on down. G, D, G, B flat C. And so on. The most important thing is that I've still got smooth voice leading for the most part, especially in the upper voice. You don't hear the upper voice, the top end of this jumping around. That's going to keep it very true to the way it's going to sound on guitar, that it's not jumping around a lot. So I'm going to try to play through the chord progression and pay attention to that top end. Even though I butchered it, you can still kind of tell that there's smoothness in the top. It's not moving around a whole lot, and so that helps a lot with the continuity of it. But that also, all of this, it got a lot more condensed, and you can take any song with any kind of crazy pattern and just find those chords, and then just find what the chord is and what notes define it, and then find a way to kind of roll it out across the piano and keep the feel of the original without having to play the exact notes. So hopefully that's helpful.